Imagine waking up at 3 a.m., shifting positions in bed again, and ouch, that sharp, deep ache in your hips reminds you why pregnancy isn't always glowing and magical. Maybe you've heard that back pain, pelvic discomfort, and that waddle walk are just part of the deal. But what if they're not, my friend? What if the strength of your hips could determine whether you experience daily pain or feel stable and strong throughout pregnancy? And spoiler alert, they can. And today we are talking about how your hip strength, or lack of it, is one of the biggest predictors of pregnancy hip pain and exactly how to fix it. So let's dive in.
Postpartum is hard. One second we feel like our bodies are miraculous, and the next we feel like we're a complete mess, out of touch with the strong, confident women we used to be, all while the fitness industry pressures us to bounce back as quickly as possible to a body that never looked like it was pregnant to begin with. That's why, whether we're 3 days postpartum or 3 years postpartum, we need the refreshing truth of gospel-focused fitness to give us energy for the physical challenges of motherhood, peace with our postpartum bodies, and kingdom-centered motivation to train for strength and stamina. So mama, whether you're sipping on cold coffee or folding 5-day-old laundry, I pray by listening every Monday, you become equipped, encouraged, and empowered for a strong motherhood, all for God's glory. This is the Strong After Birth podcast. Thanks for joining us.
And welcome to the 100th episode of the Strong After Birth podcast, previously the Hurt You Strength podcast, if you've been an OG here. And I'm so excited, and it just seems so fitting to talk about one of the most common things and struggles in pregnancy that women experience. And as I have coached women through multiple pregnancies now over the years, I can tell you from experience that building hip strength truly is key for a pain-free pregnancy, and that you don't have to live with the common, but I will not say normal, painful aspects of pregnancy. And maybe, like many people, you have tried the stretching, the prenatal yoga, or even a belly support band, but the relief is temporary at best. Maybe your OB, love the OBs, but maybe they told you just to rest more or take it easy. But listen, that advice doesn't pay off when you're still carrying a toddler on one hip while pregnant with another, right? You're doing all the right things, yet the pain persists. That's exhausting, right? Let's talk about why. Why does this happen in pregnancy? Why do we experience hip pain, pelvic girdle pain, and pain just in general around our low back? Research shows that pregnant women with weaker hip abductors, those are the muscles that stabilize your pelvis, think glute max, glute min, and glute med, are significantly more likely to develop pelvic girdle pain and low back pain in pregnancy. And one study in the Journal of Orthopedic and Sports Physical Therapy found that targeted hip strengthening reduced pain and improved hip stability by over 40%. 40% is a lot in pregnant women experiencing discomfort. Think about it like this. Your pelvis is like a suspension bridge designed to bear weight, but also to move and flex. If the supporting cables, which are hip muscles, are weak, the structure shifts and strains under the pressure. That is why our back, pelvis, or even knees can start screaming at us, especially as baby grows, as our blood volume increases, and as the weight that baby is carrying with us starts to tilt our pelvis forward. But here's the good news. When you reinforce those cables, suddenly the whole structure holds up easier. I want you to imagine that difference. You wake up in the morning, you step out of bed without that deep ache in your hips. You can go for a walk without feeling your pelvis is shifting out of place. You can pick up your toddler or groceries and move throughout your day without that nagging discomfort that really just slows us down. And even more than that, you're building a foundation that will serve you so much postpartum, because stronger hips don't just make pregnancy easier, they set you up for a smoother recovery, better core function postpartum, and a body that works for you instead of against you. One of the most encouraging things that I felt throughout pregnancy, even with some absolutely crazy stuff that happened in the first trimester, absolutely awful morning sickness. I had COVID twice. I felt like I was bedridden and went for a 2-month break from my workouts. I felt so far from myself. But one thing that I did was that I did some simple and effective core and glute strengthening exercise that took less than 3 minutes and felt like the bare minimum that I could do. But it helped to keep my momentum going so that when the nausea subsided and that second trimester vibe hit, I felt like I was still in somewhat of a groove and, per our previous episode, wasn't starting over. I was just carrying the momentum forward. I want to give you 3 really practical steps to start strengthening your hips today in pregnancy. And these steps will work regardless of if you are in the first trimester or in the last trimester, in the third trimester. So the first exercise to try, super practical here, is a banded side step. Some might call this the lateral band walk. To do this exercise, you place a resistance band around your knees and or your ankles, and you take slow, controlled steps to the side. Now, pro tip here, keep your knees slightly bent and your core engaged, butt back behind you. I typically start clients with this doing 2 to 3 sets with about 10 to 12 steps each side. The goal of this exercise is to strengthen the muscles on the outer side of our hip called our glute medius, and this helps us stabilize the pelvis while we are in a standing position, which is the position we need our pelvis to be stable most often. The second exercise you can do to help build hip stability in pregnancy is doing a glute bridge with a hold. Now, to do a glute bridge, you lie down on your back, feet hip width apart, and you lift your hips while squeezing your glutes. Now, there's a really vital piece to the glute bridge that a lot of women miss that really limits which muscles are working, and often for many women helps them to feel it more in their glutes. So don't miss this. When you start your glute bridge, I want you to think about tucking your pelvis or flattening your low back to the ground. Once you have tucked your pelvis and flattened your low back to the ground, you're going to brace your core or pull your belly button up and in, and then think about squeezing your glutes as you lift your hips up at the top. Now, the hold is really important because it helps to engage more of our glutes and our core in that endurance-based form. Now, if you're listening to me say this and you're like, yeah, Laura, glute bridges are ultra basic. If you've done glute bridges before, I can just tell you they're never the same when you're pregnant. And first trimester glute bridges do not feel the same as third trimester glute bridges. And I can also tell you that there's a lot of variations you can try to help build stability and challenge yourself at the same time. If you haven't ever tried a single leg glute bridge where you hug the opposite knee into your chest, or even a single leg hip thrust, which is an elevated progression of a glute bridge, I would suggest those as alternatives that would be a little bit more challenging and still safe and progressive for baby. The third is a single leg balance hold. Now, I used to think these exercises were just for old people who wanted to improve their balance. And then I realized actually there's a lot of benefits to doing single leg holds, especially for us who are doing a lot of strength exercises and other things where we have both feet on the floor. Now, one of the things that can be really challenging in pregnancy is when we're walking, we feel a lot of that pelvic girdle pain or pain directly in our groin area. And this exercise helps to stabilize our pelvis while we're in that single leg position that happens while we are walking or bending down to get something in the floor with one leg, if that is something you do. I find myself doing that often. They call that the caddy swing, by the way. Here's how we do this exercise. You stand on one leg with a slight bend in your knee and hold it for 30 seconds. I also encourage clients to hold the opposite knee, so the knee that is not being stood on, up high to activate their hip flexors and deep core. Once you can hold it for 30 seconds, try to do it for a minute and then switch sides. To progress this exercise, you can try adding a soft bend in your knee or even a small knee dip to make it more challenging. Now, maybe you're thinking, Laura, I have a lot on my plate. I do not want to be somebody who just throws more things at you, but if you are doing exercises right now, like maybe you're doing an extra day of cardio or walking or running, I just want to encourage you, if you are in pain, doing more of the same will not help you. So you're busy, I get it, and adding more to your plate can feel impossible, but these exercises take less than 5 minutes a day. And the trade-off is that you will feel strong, stable, and pain-free as your body carries life. And my friend, I can tell you it is worth it. This reminds me of Psalm 18:33, which is such an encouragement and was a verse that I clung to often in pregnancy when I just felt so depleted and drained. And it says, "He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He causes me to stand on the heights." And though we can feel far from the heights in pregnancy, can I just remind you that your body is designed for strength and stability, and it is God who sustains you. Yes, pregnancy stretches you in ways beyond the physical, but God has built resilience inside your body. And strengthening your hips isn't just about controlling our body or fixing, it's about stewarding the body God has entrusted you to do so that you can walk through this season of life with confidence and joy. Okay, if you're thinking, Laura, this makes sense, but I still don't know where to start. Start small, my friend. Start simple and start today. You don't have to make this a big overhaul. In fact, I would encourage you not to. I want to leave you with one of the most helpful tools that you can have when you start to focus on building hip strength, and that is a timeline. I remember using the pregnancy tracking app and seeing the timeline of baby's development and baby's milestones and thought it was just so cool, but really helpful to have perspective of how long it takes to grow. And in the same way, as we work at building strength, it's not an on or off switch. It takes time to build muscle. And so I just want to give you this timeline that on average, when clients start working on hip strengthening exercises, it can take anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks before they start feeling pain-free. Now, typically after the first 2 to 3 exercise sessions, they tend to feel a little bit better by doing some of those glute side steps or the glute bridges or even the single leg balance hold, but it can take time to get to a place where we feel that strength and notice it outside of our workouts. So I want to leave you with that timeline so that you can allow yourself some grace and to know this is going to take a little time, but that time is so worth it. And if you want to get ahead of rebuilding your core postpartum and start working on your core strength now for what you'll need in those weeks following delivery, then be sure to check the show notes for my 3-day core restore. That is a free guide loaded with powerful exercises specifically designed for postpartum and pregnant women who are looking to have a better relationship with their core strength and have a strong and stable hips as they go throughout pregnancy and postpartum. Until next time, friends, stay strong. All the love, Coach Laura.